Good evening, members. Before I open the meeting, please can I ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback. If you have any remote participants, please keep your camera and microphone off unless you're wishing to speak, and ideally do not, and please can we avoid interrupting members whilst I'm talking. Thank you. Please ask any remote participants to keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. Please note that the meeting will be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swellborough Council or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you will not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Could I ask members please to speak loudly and clearly into their microphones and to switch their microphone off after speaking, otherwise remote participants may be unable to hear the next speaker. Welcome everyone to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting, including any visiting members attending remotely and members of the public. And a welcome, of course, to all of our staff in attendance in the room this evening, again, or remotely. There's no fire drill planned, and if the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Under no circumstances should you use the lift. Is there anyone in attendance that requires extra assistance this evening? Could you make yourselves known to me? Okay, thank you. Are there any apologies for absence and confirmation of substitutes, please?
Thank you, Chair. There is no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Members, is it your wish that I approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October 2024, minute numbers 341 to 355? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest, members? Councillor Palmer, please.
I'll have a declaration. It's a non-pecuniary under agenda item 8, local heritage list. If you look at page 75, LHL 143, my house is the former pub called the Lee Arms, which is in there and it's mentioned, but I don't think it has a great impact. But I thought in openness I'd let you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So now we move on to item 5, which is the local plan review, housing historic delivery and local plan review housing targets. And I'll thank our officer to introduce it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second time this report has come to this committee with a decision made at the December meeting to defer a recommendation to full council until the evidence-based study into whether there is an exceptional circumstance for a lower housing target had been presented to the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group. So that study was presented to the group and noted by it at its formal meeting on the 13th of this month. So just to go into a brief summary of the actual report before you, between the start of the local plan period for bearing fruits and the 31st of March 2024, 6,700 dwellings had been delivered within the borough. This means that 51% of the intended dwellings for that plan period have been delivered against the plan's target of 13,192. At the 1st of April of this year, there were further 7,047 dwellings monitored as consented but not built out, and this totals 53.4% of the remaining local plan bearing fruits target. And if they were to be built out, then there would be a surplus against that plan's target. When looking at the location of completed dwellings and those consented and not built out against the local plan bearing fruits growth targets, it can be identified that growth in Sittingbourne and Queenborough and Rushenden has fallen considerably short of target by 16.8% and 11.2% respectively, whilst growth in other non-planned target areas has been considerably higher, in excess of 21.7% when you're looking at all the completions and the current supply. This means that while smaller settlements within the borough, their targets have broadly been met against the existing local plan, targets for the two of the borough's highest settlements have been considerably missed. So moving on to the second part of the report and setting a local plan housing target. So the starting point for setting this target is to agree the length of the plan period, which as set out in the report is for 16 years. Then determine what the local housing need is through the use of the government's imposed standard method for calculation. For Swale, with the application of a 5% buffer to the standard method for resilience through the local plan draft and examination, the target within the report is set out as 17,472 dwellings over the 16-year plan period. When considering the housing target, elements of the council's existing supply are discounted to determine what the actual new growth will be during the proposed plan period. So the things that we discount are, for example, existing stock of sites with planning consent but not built out, the remaining local plan allocations without planning consent, made neighbourhood plan allocations without planning consent, and also allowances made in the calculation for sites known as windfall that will come through the market and gain planning consent during the plan period. So when considering all these existing supply knowns, the dwellings growth for testing within the local plan review would be 8,326 dwellings. So members of this committee are being asked to recommend to full council that the proposed growth within the draft Regulation 18 plan consultation will be for that 8,326 dwellings. That includes a review of the remaining local plan bearing fruits allocations and also an additional 335 units to allow for potential changes to the MPPF that are proposed for December of this year. The recommendations from the report also include amendments to the figures be delegated to the head of place in consultation with the committee chair, as for example, new planning permissions are granted, new dwellings completed, and any evidence which concludes previously granted or allocated sites that are no longer deliverable. So if this approach to setting the local plan housing target is agreed, the recommendations in the report go on to set out requirements for additional transport modelling, sustainability, and also amending the local development scheme to reflect the time for the additional evidence that's requested within the recommendations. If the additional evidence are agreed, then the final recommendation within the report before you is to defer the vision, objectives and growth options paper for full council next week to allow the further evidence to be gathered prior to making a recommendation on a preferred growth approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chair. I was quite disappointed in this report to see recommendations that had come from councillors at the local, at the PTPWG being argued against. Sometimes makes you wonder why we have PTP. The report also ignores a lot of the points that were made in the exceptions report, which informed the debate at PTP. The summary at 2.5, I don't think, really covers the discussion that we had. The exceptions report did indicate that there was more work that needed to be done to establish a robust evidence case demonstrating why the standard number is not deliverable. I think we're all aware that the housing numbers are high and are of dubious sustainability. If you look at the ACOM report, then there are questions that it does raise and points that it takes forward. 5.356 discusses testing environmental constraints further. Now, the idea is that you try and meet the standard target and then build a robust evidence case if you feel that isn't actually deliverable. To make that robust case, you must do some extra work. So that's what we are seeing at 4.59. The environmental constraints are at 5.356. 5.42 suggests extra work could be done on the basis of transport. We all know there are severe transport problems in the borough, which won't be helped by all this extra housing. There is also arguments for looking at the impact of the commuter imbalance. Now, that was a recommendation from PTP that we do some work on the impact of commuting, because basically we have the houses and the jobs are elsewhere, which is a non-sustainable forward-moving model. This is being argued against in this report, even though it was a recommendation from PTP. there is a good reason that that was put in. And it's one of the recommendations of the report that we asked for. So why we are asking for reports that give us arguments that we can build on to achieve what we want, while we're being recommended not to support that now seems a bit odd. So on that basis, I don't think we should remove or change the recommendation that we go ahead with the commuting report. I think we need to be doing everything we can to illustrate why the housing numbers are unsustainable, why we will have difficulties delivering them. And I really don't think it's right that at one committee we make a recommendation and then we see a report that's arguing against it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Larissa.
So just to explain to members, the difference between a committee system and a cabinet system when we moved to this was this whole thing about officers writing reports. A cabinet report, although it may be drafted by an officer, is in the name of the cabinet member. What has to happen here is the officer has to write the report giving their best advice and giving their recommendations as what they believe in their technical nature they should do. That does not mean that members have to accept that. Members can, and often do in other places, come up with something that they want to come up with. But what has to happen is the officer has to be true to their technical knowledge and experience and advise members, because that's what we are. We're not decision makers, we're advisors. So what this report does, this report advises you what the officer feels is the right course of action. Whether you choose to take that course of action is entirely up to you. You can put an amendment forward and change, or you can vote against it. But it is what has been written down might not be what members would like to see, but it is what is in effect the officer's experience and professional and technical response and recommendations. And that's what's in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you. That seems to conflict with other advice that we've had, where a report should reflect what the chair wants it to reflect. And as officers have been aware here and in other places, sometimes they have to deliver a report which puts out the pros and cons, but they have to deliver a report that is supporting what the chair of the committee is asking them to support. That seems not to have happened here.
Thank you. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, if I can, each of the recommendations in the report reflects what PTP recommended. It's the narrative of the report that goes on to discuss that, as Larissa has highlighted, from the officer's perspective. But each of the recommendations very much reflect what PTP discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating at this stage. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, as it was mentioned in here, is around the 5-year numbers and the sites that have failed to deliver. And I think it's worthy of comment is that the Homes England site is well behind. We've had an awful lot of taxpayers' money invested into that site. And I think it's entirely unacceptable that part of our 5-year supply has been so substantially put at risk by Homes England, quite frankly. It's appalling that we have had a major planning application called in for substantial issues, and it's unclear why, how that came about. And yet at the same time, the government is sitting on a site that is ready to go and has not brought that forward. And I think that needs to be put out there clearly in the public domain, that the government needs to pull its socks up with regards to Homes England and the delivery of that site. It's no good using a stick of housing numbers to whack us all over the head when they fail to deliver on their own site.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
I expected others to contribute. So I'm happy to move recommendations 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6. I think that the recommendation 3, the site-specific transport modelling for each of the 6 growth options under consideration, I think that would be hard to get a meaningful result from any traffic modelling pending the outcome of the Highstead appeal, because basically you'd have to run them all again, with the possible exception of Highstead. If it didn't get permission, if it did get permission, they would have done their own traffic modelling during the appeal. So I don't think there is any benefit in doing any traffic modelling until we've had the Highstead appeal. I would also request that consultation with chairs includes the vice chairs, so that you're getting that wider opportunity to have input and consideration and feedback. When it says in consultation with the committee chair, I would just add vice chair and PTP. But apart from that, so with that change, I would recommend 1, 2, 4 and 5 and 6.
Councillor Hunt.
Mr. Chair, I'm a bit confused now, because I'm sort of following this, and I sort of agree with what Councillor Baldock said in the beginning about this report looking like we were not agreeing to what we discussed at the Plan and Transportation Policy Working Group. But number 3 is, and has been said by officers, the recommendations we got are exactly what we discussed and what everyone voted on at the PTPWG. And number 3 is exactly what everyone said and voted to recommend to this committee. So I'm not sure where it's coming from now that we shouldn't be doing that. I do agree that we should be taking this forward. It's what the recommendation, or what we recommended from the group that's here to this committee tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Thank you. I mean, I think I would agree with Councillor Baldock on the transport modelling, though, because I think there's a later item about the LDS as a whole being put back because of the Highstead Valley, and especially given the budget constraints and that all the that will come because of that. I think that does make sense at this point because of the changing circumstance to postpone the transport modelling. But I certainly would agree that with the 6th motion recommendation, that deferral of that vision in the light of that is also something that needs to be delayed because of both the evidence from the exceptional circumstance report and the impact of Highstead Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. If I could just clarify on the LDS paper that's coming up next. This is the version that was agreed at PTP prior to any conversation about traffic modelling and prior to any conversation about Highstead Park. So that reflects the PTP previous position. It's been put on the agenda tonight after this paper because the outcomes of this discussion may influence the local development scheme. And I think one of the recommendations is that if these changes are accepted, this group delegates to officers to update the LDS and then to take it direct to full council on the basis of the information tonight, rather than have to then go through PTP, PNR and full council again. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gold, do you want to come back?
In that case, I'm slightly confused about the various papers that have been circulating. I thought there was another LDS timetable coming up, which not but updated because of Highstead Valley. But maybe I'm now confused with the various ones that have been circulating.
Joanne.
Thank you. So the LDS paper that is coming up is the, if you like, the historic version. Officers haven't updated that to reflect the traffic modelling or a delay due to heisted because that has not been agreed. If that is agreed tonight, that will then impact the LDS. But the version that you have in the agenda pack is the version that we have the mandate from PTPWG to bring forward at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thanks. Joanne said that depending on this, depends on the next item. My thought when I read these papers, let alone the extra stuff, was, OK, we've got no money, so surely the budget item should be the first one, and then everything else goes on from there. Because if we haven't got any money, but we so want to do something, we're prepared for the woman at the front to issue a 114 notice, at least we're doing it in that full knowledge. This, it's, well, let's agree this, and let's agree that, and let's agree that. Oh, gosh, we've got the budget. Well, it was a 1.2, 1.3, 1.6 mil gap. As a result of the last 3 hours, members, we're now on to 6 mil gap. You know, that is so irresponsible. And we really need to start getting with the programme. If we ain't got the money, we've got to cut our cloth according to our... cut our coat according to our cloth means. Really, if we haven't got the money to lash out, there's no money tree in that back garden out there. We've really got to start getting real. And what are our priorities? If our priorities are to do a 100% hunky-dory, absolutely solid local plan for the future, for the people now and for the people that are here in the future, then that is our priority. And you can't have, oh, and let's have this, and let's have that, and let's have that. Oh, and let's have that as well, chaps. Right? It just don't work. We've got to actually look at everything in the round. None of these are isolated. It all goes together. And the bottom line is, if we ain't got the money, we can't do it. So really, in my humble opinion, that budget item should have been the first thing on the list, and then everything else flows from that. Because if you ain't got the money, you can't do it. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that rant. As you know, I'm still on those pills. It will get worse as the evening goes on.
I reserve my right to remove you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Gibson, please.
I'm not taking any pills, but I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Harrison and look forward to the improvement over the evening. But my question really is on that topic. You know, when we started this process 6 months ago, the most optimistic among us would have expected Swale Council to outlast this plan. We can all pretty confidently say that that's not going to happen now. Swale Council will not exist in its current format, even by the time this plan starts, let alone concludes. So what implications does that have for our plan setting and our responsibilities within that, particularly in terms of our direction of travel and direction of location? Because whilst it might be prudent borough planning to place all of our housing stock in one part of the borough, it would be very poor neighbourly form if they are about to become our council colleagues, and we might want to consider that in our planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa.
So the white paper on devolution hasn't been published yet. The white paper on devolution, we don't know yet whether it's going to contain anything on local government reform. What we do know is that if there is a desire in some quarters, and you'd have read that in the newspapers, for local government reform, what we think will happen and what we're being told through kind of conversations and hearsay is that it will have a different timeline. This is not the first time that there have been discussions on local government reform, and I thought it was going to happen last time and it didn't. So I think we have to work, certainly for now, as if local government reform is not going to happen yet. There are other models available. Combined mayoral authorities could be a model that Kent decide works. So I think at the moment it is too early to say, let's not have a local plan. Please bear in mind the government has said that there is an expectation that people will have a local plan, and there will be possible actions for people who are not working towards a local plan. So we have to balance the possibility of devolution and local government reform, or more local government reform, with what we know the government are saying about around their expectation about local authorities' plan making.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll come back to Councillor Baldock then. So you made a formal proposal, Councillor Baldock? Seconded by Councillor Bonney. Did you want that repeating so you're aware of what that proposal... Right, Councillor Baldock.
Right, the proposal is that support recommendations 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6 with the addition of vice chairs as well as chairs, but not to support recommendation 3.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I did think of it when he said it before, but when it went in the heat of the moment. And what I thought was chairs and vice chairs, and that's fine, but that does mean this Policy and Resources Committee is cross-party. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, a number of parties here, and so we're all here making a decision. So I think if you're going to take something to one side, it would be much better if you had rep from each group. I just thought that would be fairer. I know we're not here about fair, we're here about other things, but I just thought I'd chuck that in the mix.
Okay, Councillor Gibson.
I'm happy to second Councillor Harrison's amendment to the amendment.
Councillor Baldock.
I just think that would make getting anything nodded through or agreed very time consuming, as we already have trouble getting things signed off sometimes. So, but if everybody wants a consultation with all groups, then yeah.
Okay. Okay, so do you want to formally propose that amendment to the amendment? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Gibson. Those in favour of the... No, it's amendment first. Yeah. Relax. It's all right. So those in favour of the amendment to the amendment? Those against? And abstentions? Okay, so the amendment passes 7-6 and 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, right, back to the substantive motion then. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? So again, that one's carried, 10 for and 3 abstentions. Thank you, members. Right, we're going to move on to agenda item 6 with a tabled update.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just start with the actual purpose of the report, then I'll come on to the tabled update, because it kind of follows in that order. So in terms of the requirement to update the local development scheme, the Council under legislation must set out the documents, including local plans, that when prepared will comprise the development plan for the area. The local development scheme is the approach for setting out this requirement, and it should be made publicly accessible and kept up to date so that local communities and interested parties can keep track of the progress. So this latest local development scheme update is required to address members' requests back in August to carry out additional work to inform the Regulation 18 draft plan document. The work included identifying additional sites in Sinterbourne, identifying additional sites for rural older person housing, reviewing specific sites for densification, and reviewing draft existing HELA sites from the perspective of alternative transport solutions. So the LDS update before you does not propose a change in the approach to consultation that was agreed at full council on the 24th of July. The extension is required to allow officers time to carry out the work streams that were requested. So the LDS in the main report proposes an extra 3 months to prepare the Regulation 18 document for consultation, and then a further additional 3 months between the Regulation 18 consultation and the Regulation 19. Since the LDS update was considered by the Plan Transportation Policy Working Group, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government called in the 2 plan applications commonly known as Highstead Park, which the update paper provides more detail on. So those 2 schemes propose considerable levels of development that includes, amongst other matters, over 8,500 homes, employment land, link roads and a new junction with the M2. So as a result, members have raised concerns about the timings of the Local Plan Regulation 18 consultation due to the impact on the plan's objectives should the applications be consented by the government. So the update paper provides that further detail. It sets out the benefits, risks and implications of further delay in the Regulation 18 consultation until Q4 of next year. So what's been asked of this committee is to recommend to full council a preferred revised timetable for the local plan review and to also recommend an updated local development scheme to reflect that chosen timetable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I've read this a couple of times. And I know what I've read in it, so I would like the officer's opinion. This reads to me that the risk of delaying outweighs, I'm not going to say far outweighs, but definitely outweighs the benefits of delaying. To be fair, the reason we're in this position is down to us. We kept delaying and kicking the can down the road and kicking the can down the road and kicking the can down the road, in my humble opinion. So there comes a time where you've got to say, no, we really need to get on with this. And obviously, there are some things we can't get on with because of outside factors. But my reading of this is that the risks of delaying yet again far outweighs the benefit of getting on with it, especially as, I don't know if it was this one, they all meld into one, to be fair. One of them said that we're on the radar, not special measures, but we're being kept an eye on. So, you know, I take the view that we've got a job to do, we should be getting on with it, not waiting for somebody else to come in at some point down the road and do it for us, because I think that's just abrogating our responsibility. We're elected to do the job of being a councillor. We're appointed by council to sit on various committees on behalf of the council to do the various things that need to be done. Keep abrogating and saying, no, not me, Gov, somebody else done it, is quite wrong, actually. So that is my opinion, but as I say, I could have read the report wrong, but it seems to me the risks far outweigh the benefits, and that we should press on as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Gibson and Councillor Gold.
I think far outweigh. Councillor Harrison started off by saying a little bit and then ended up with far outweighs. I think especially as we've now not decided to go ahead with extra traffic modelling, we have the potential of doing a whole load of work, going out for Reg 18 with sites, if we can even get agreement on that, with the potential of Highstead in the background. And it's not us abrogating our responsibility, we've been working towards this. The opportunity was there in October to go for a specified option. We lost that, we missed that opportunity. And now we're in a position where I don't think we are remotely able to come up with a preferred option with Highstead hanging in the background. Even though Highstead would probably only contribute around 4,000 to 5,000 houses towards our housing number within the planning period, when you've got to find 6,000, that's kind of a big number, but then we've got to find extra in the meantime. So it is going to have a huge impact, the outcome of this appeal, on what this council's local plan is. To go ahead with a Reg 18, potentially opening ourselves up to judicial review for even going out to it, I think is risking this council's exposure to huge abortive costs. The benefits are, I think, quite clear. We can continue with work towards the local plan, and when we know the outcome of Highstead, we can then put in process what we were going to do anyway, taking into account the outcome. How do you think seriously we are going to recommend sufficient sites to go out to Reg 19, a site-specific consultation, when there will be sites in there that wouldn't even have to be considered if Highstead goes through? Can you see that getting through full council? Can you see anybody voting for a local plan that's going to put sites in their area that local people don't want, knowing that they might not even have to put them in the final Reg 19? We will be repeating work at extra cost. It is absolute nonsense to think we'll be in a position to proceed with this hanging over us. The fact that we can't demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing, that's because of, as Councillor Bonney said, other factors outside our control, such as stalled housing developments, which the government could take action on to make developers deliver, rather than scuppering our options by calling in what is effectively half of our local plan. So I think the delaying and adopting this second timetable is the only feasible way of moving forward without huge wasted expenditure. We are having our housing strategy put on hold whilst the government makes its decision. Spending money in the meantime on work that will have to be repeated or that will potentially have no bearing whatsoever on what we can take forward, for a council strapped of cash, seems to me a very risky strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Gibson.
Whilst I share Councillor Baldock's concerns, I think I land on the side of Councillor Harrison that the risks are greater in the other direction. You know, we in Faversham already have a large strategic site with an extant planning permission that would remain a risk the longer we fail to have a local plan. Not only is it a risk to the people of Faversham as a development in its own right, it also, were it to be passed, would be noticeably worse were we not to have a local plan. If the local plan is enforced and put into practice sooner, the Duchy could engage with the NHS more effectively. They could engage with the health authority and the education boards more effectively. We would get a better development from them by having a local plan in place. It is no secret that I think the proposals in our current local plan are bad, and I strongly believe the people of Faversham will agree with me and feed that back in the Regulation 18 in process, and I think we should ask them to do that. I think we should give them the opportunity to do so and do it as quickly as possible. I wholeheartedly agree. We should not be leaving this job to Angela Rayner. If I had my way, she wouldn't have taken our job on Highstead planning application away from us either, but we should not be leaving this extra step to the Minister. So I would prefer we stick with the original timetable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Thank you for letting me speak. I think I would agree with Councillor Baldock on this one. I think the risks, the benefits of delaying are concrete. We know what's happening there, but there's we've got a rough idea of the timetable. These are things that are going to be happening. Most of the risks are about if other things happen. They're consequent on other people's actions. And I think, the progress can still be made towards the Reg 18 on looking at options in the light of that, but just putting it forward to the public when that's still hanging over things is very difficult. I can't see how that can really, we can have any realistic option when actually it may change completely in the light of a huge development like this. So I think progress can go on in the background. It doesn't mean we have to stop everything, and be prepared for sort of, if we like, either outcome. But I think moving towards a public consultation when there's that sort of degree of uncertainty because of the outstanding decision, I don't think is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I have to be honest, I'm just getting fed up talking about this local plan and local development scheme and everything else. We keep going round in circles, going backwards and forwards and not knowing what to do. And as I said, at the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group, I feel like just saying, let's just give up and just not bother with it. But the only thing I will say on it, which you won't hear very often, is I just completely agree with everything Councillor Baldock's just said.
Just for the minutes, could you repeat that? Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, James, for speaking like it is there. I'm stuck on this one. I can see both sides. It feels like without a local plan, then it does open potential for speculative sites, which we already have. I get that, and an increased risk there. Figuratively, as it finished last night on the bake-off, if we were going to bake a meat and potato pie, and in doing so we forgot to put the meat in, the meat being Highstead, then that ain't going to be a complete pie. So why would you bake it in the first place? That's the way my brain's working this evening. Apologies. Yeah. And to delay it, if we weren't to delay it and go ahead, and then irrespective of the amount of time, the funds and the cost of that, which questionable, can we afford to do it given the previous conversation? I don't know. It would certainly be a headache for Lisa and others, I think, on that. But if we were to do that and we go out to consultation, and then because we've done it before and the public's view on this would, well, we've done this once, now we've done it again, and now it's changed again, are we going to do it a third time? What are we, what is the purpose of this council? And I agree with Councillor Harrison's point about that the decision should be made by this council, but unfortunately, we can't make that decision because central government has stepped in and taken it away of the meat from the pie. And the comments in the document, the new government have made clear its position. They expect all local authorities to have an up-to-date local plan. Get that? And those not progressing plans will become subject to intervention by the government. They're the ones who've intervened on this. I can't see how they can hold us responsible for when they've actually put the great big spanner in the works. In a very underhand and unfair way. I'm going to be quiet on that particular point. So I can see both sides. And my final bit is, even with the proposed timetable, I've never experienced this before that I can remember. Although the review or the hearing on Highstead is going to take a while through to part of next year, that doesn't say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Secretary of State will make a decision in July of next year. They could say, oh, no, I'm not sure about this. I'm going to extend it. Does it go to September? Does it go to December? Does it go to 2026, 2027? At which point do you think, actually, we should have probably done the local plan back in the time anyway? We're up a certain creek without a certain instrument on this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just to comment on the timescales, you're absolutely right. I've taken to referring to the timescales post-inquiry as nebulous. The planning inspector has to write his or her report. The Secretary of State has to consider said report. There is no associated time frame for both of those. So, yes, this is predicated on a little bit of a best guess. We're kind of in uncharted territory. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
That's all I'll do.
Yeah, I think we've talked quite a lot about finance, and we're all quite invested in finance of this council. But I think we need to be clear that actually the position we've been put in by government has actually cost us money, a lot of money. And that's had a ramification now on our local plan making process. And I think what I'm hearing, and I agree with, is that we don't want to waste money on creating a plan that then we tear up because the Secretary of State has decided on something that has a fairly cataclysmic impact on our local plan. I mean, they set these numbers. They're not delivered by the developers. We have little control over that. And yet we're the ones that are hammered. Homes England sit there with potentially 990 homes on Queenborough, I think it is, roughly, of which the vast majority have not been delivered. And when you take that in the context of our numbers here and what we've got to do for our local development scheme, that's a big fat number. And I think government needs to take into consideration what it's doing to us as an authority. It's tearing us apart, quite frankly. So I'd like to just say get on with it and get it under our belt. But equally, I can see that we quite honestly would be throwing pound notes out the window. And I find that galling. And I think the local residents would find that galling as well. So I agree that we need to adopt a delayed time frame here. It's just run a horse and cart through our local plan process. And that's the clear message from this committee as to what it's done to us.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
And can I just say that we are not stopping the process here, that we are continuing, but it's affecting our timeline. You know, obviously we are continuing with other work streams, but that has such a fundamental bearing.
Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I find it hard. I think the public expect us to do it, but they expect to do it properly. I'm not sure which side of the fence to come down until Councillor Gould highlighted, and just now Councillor Bonney, that we are carrying on with the process. We're just not rushing into the decision, which may then need to be overturned anyway because we don't know what the outcome of Halstead is going to be. So the interference of government have caused a big major problem. I think I will make a decision as it comes to it, but I think Councillor Gould's intervention was very worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
In that case, I'll formally propose the recommended timetable on the back of the tabled update project plan going forward on bottom of page 4.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Well, 2 points. The first point was that when I spoke originally, I did say, could the officer say which way, whether I was right or wrong in my understanding of the officer report. It is an officer report. I got that when we went in the committee structure a couple of years ago. The second point was, which I did think of when I read it, and I thought, well, no, because they'd have said, wouldn't they? If we're not in special measures, but we're being kept an eye on. Number one, do we know how much this appeal, this Halstead thing is going to cost this council? And do we have a say? Do we have a say on it? Does this council have a decision on whether they? Well, okay, you're calling it in. You carry on, love. Here's all the stuff that went to committee. Read it and inwardly digest. Blah blah blah. Or do we go in all guns blazing and defend the decision that we didn't make because we weren't allowed to the hilt? So that's first. So 2. Number 1, officer opinion. Number 2, how much is this Secretary of State calling going to cost this council pounds, shillings and pence, those who remember it. And the third point is this persons who are advising, helping, supporting this council in the local plan process thingy, could they not say, oh, well, as you've been called in, you won't be expected to do X, or as you've been called in, you can do everything except Y, or as you've been called in, everything stops today. Do these advisors not give us any advice on that? Because then there will be people up and down the country, councils up and down the country who get called in every other week, I'm quite sure. This is the second time since I've been here that we've been called in. So I would hope that that is the sort of thing that these advisors, if we're in special-ish measures, would be saying. So if I could have an answer to those 3 points, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, if I can try and summarise the approach to the discussion here, the big question is if the high-stead plan applications are approved or not. And then the element of risk to the two approaches. So, for example, going with the Reg 18, April of next year, or waiting the further 6 months. So in the case that the actual consultation approach that's been agreed through full council is that we're going to be doing a draft Regulation 18 consultation document. So this isn't as stringent as the legislative requirements of a Regulation 19, so the issues of judicial review will not occur at that stage. It's very broad what you can do at the Reg 18. If there are issues with our evidence base at that stage, then we have the opportunity to refine it, to make amendments when we go through to the Reg 19 stage, where we then have to meet the legal tests. So in terms of the draft Reg 18 plan approach, that's the most robust the council can take, and it does allow us that opportunity to make amendments to the draft of the plan as we move forward to Reg 19. So looking at the issue of whether or not the high steads are approved or not, if they're not approved, the council will effectively lose 6 months in its 2-year timetable. With the deadline under the current plan making system is now December 2026, so we'd lose 6 months. That would then only give us a year to run the 2 consultations and submit for examination. So that can be done, but if there's any further delays after that, then there's a likelihood we've missed the deadline. So I think that's the main consideration if the high stead is refused. If it is allowed by the government, then there will be the need to do new pieces of evidence between a Reg 18 and Reg 19 if we don't delay, and there will be some costs involved in that. But providing we do the mandatory amounts of evidence, then there's opportunities to keep those costs down to a minimum. But as I say, it's really the balancing act of what this council want to choose to do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. Chair, I did also ask a couple of other questions. I wouldn't mind an answer, thanks.
Yeah. Stuart, did you want to?
How much is this high-stead appeal likely to cost this council if we go all guns blazing, or if we just say, well, there's the paperwork, love, get on with it? And the third question was about the help, support and guidance of these people that are supposed to help and support and guide us. Thanks.
Joanne, please.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the costs, we are working on it at this point in time. It's still relatively new news that this is how we are going to be approaching high stead, and we're looking at the options open to us and what they will cost. So that's a work in progress. In terms of the advice that we can get, we've had an initial introductory meeting, which was very much sort of fact-finding and scene setting. We're in fairly unique circumstances, so there's not much precedent that we can look to, but we can certainly be asking the questions. That was what they set themselves out as they're to do effectively, is to assist in any areas that we need assistance. Anything to add? No. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Just on a clarification question, are there any implications from the fact that our Reg 24 and the modifications consultation run into PERDA for this council's all-up elections, and any implication of the fact that this council would not be approving our local plan? We would be delegating to our future council, which I'm sure many of us would hope to be on, but there is no guarantee of that, to vote for that local plan. So are there any kind of logistical or PERDA implications around that? Thank you.
Larissa?
So the PERDA rules are around using council resources, but also it talks about taking controversial decisions. So actually being in consultation during PERDA is not allowed within the rules. The large risk that you have, this council has, is that the administration changes, or a lot of councillors choose not to stand, and you have a new cohort of councillors who take one look at the plan and say, absolutely not, no thank you, and then we're back to square one. So taking the decision after... Sorry, I didn't hear you, Councillor Baldock. What did you say? Fair enough. Oh, right, thank you. But if you're talking just on cost and redoing things, if the new council were to vote against, you would be back to square one, starting again, and that would be for that council then to take that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, sir. Just responding to what Stuart just said, so that, as I understood what he just said, is if Highstead is approved, we've gone ahead with the local plan, we need to go ahead and redo it. If we delay and don't go ahead with the local plan, then basically either way, we end up doing things in a compressed time scale after the Highstead Valley decision comes down, and we have to do things twice, whether or not is that okay? So if it's not approved and we've gone ahead and actually got something different, then we're okay. But there's, if you like, two of the three options involve doing things twice, and one only if it's not approved and we've got a plan that, as an alternative, do we not have to do things twice? Yes.
Yeah. Stuart, can you just confirm that's...
So Reg 18, as a minimum requirement, needs to look at the issues and options for the local authority area that it's within. So we've already done that consultation previously in 2021. We can also be incorporating that into the Reg 18 when we do it this time round. So that's the minimum requirement for Reg 18. So even if there are required changes to the draft plan at Reg 18, we could still move straight to Reg 19. There's no need to redo a Reg 18 because we'll have the feedback from the Reg 18, from the Reg 18 consultation. We'll also then know what the decision is for Highstead, and then we'll have a comprehensive evidence base to go straight to Reg 19 from there, if that makes sense. There's no need to redo the Reg 18.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baldock.
And I'm really concerned about this rush to do a Reg 18 irrespective of the cost, which seems to me a little reckless. And we've already said and agreed that we need to build a firmer evidence base. We've just agreed an extra piece of work in the last agenda item. So if we're going to rush to do a Reg 18 that we might have to redo, without the full evidence that we need to test out lower housing numbers, why on earth would we choose to do that? Why on earth would we decide to sidestep the extra work that's needed and build up a robust case, testing the scenarios, testing the options? What we're hearing is, oh, don't worry about spending money on Highstead, just go ahead with a local plan, don't really matter what it's like as long as we've got it done. No, we need to get a local plan that A, will get through full council, and B, which puts us in the strongest position possible. That's why we've commissioned extra work. That's why we're looking to see what development sustainability arguments we can put forward. We have to see what happens with Highstead. If it doesn't go through, and we've to continue to work and build up robust evidence, we could, and I think this is correct, we could actually go straight to a Reg 19. We could do a Reg 18 and followed by a very quick turnaround on a Reg 19. If we continue to do the work and get ready for Highstead not being approved. But as Councillor Gould said, two of the three strategies, two of the three pathways lead to us having to basically redo a whole load of work after we get the outcome of Highstead. That's expensive when we haven't got a lot of money. It creates total chaos in the public perception of what's going on. When you put Reg 18 to them, with all these sites in, and Highstead's hanging around, and the worst thing is, we could get a Reg 18 approved, and they put Highstead on top. That's another danger that could actually happen. You know, we agree to find as many houses as we can, put that forward, and then we get 9,000 on top of it. So I just think this rush to do a Regulation 18 with Highstead hanging over us would be a huge expensive folly and would be really putting the reputation of this council amongst the public at risk, because they wouldn't understand, much like me, why the hell we're doing it.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to take this one to the vote now then. So those in favour of the recommendation on the back of page 6, which is the amended timetable. Those against? And abstentions. So that's 10 for and 3 against. So the recommendation for the timescale sippage is carried. Thank you. Right, move on to agenda item 7, which is Kent's Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And I'll hand over to our officer for an introduction and outline, please.
Thank you, Chair. Local nature recovery strategies, referred to as the LNRS, were created under the 2021 Environment Act and are a system of spatial strategies for nature and environmental improvement that underpin England's nature recovery network. The LNRS map nature recovery actions and target locations where they're most needed and where they provide the best environmental outcomes, with the aim of joining up national efforts to reverse the decline of biodiversity. The LNRS for Kent and Medway will be one of 48 in total. Together these will cover the whole of England with no gaps or overlaps to deliver the government's commitment to ending the decline of nature and supporting its recovery. The LNRS will include agreed priorities for nature's recovery, a map of the most valuable existing areas for nature, a map of proposals for creating or improving habitat for nature, and inclusion of wider environmental goals. The LNRS will therefore provide a source of evidence for local planning authorities to prepare their local plans, helping authorities understand locations important for conserving and enhancing biodiversity. In Kent and Medway, the LNRS is prepared by KCC as a responsible authority, and its development is run under the banner Making Space for Nature in Kent and Medway. The strategy is being developed collaboratively through engagement with a wide breadth of stakeholders to establish shared priorities for nature recovery and wider environmental goals. Swale Borough Council has a formal role as a supporting authority. The regulations set out the role of supporting authorities is to review the LNRS before public consultation and publication to confirm that they are content. Officers of the Council from the Planning Policy Team, Green Spaces Team, Climate and Ecological Emergency Team have been involved in the LNRS preparation processes to date. This paper is not to agree the Council's response to the actual consultation itself, but requests that delegation is given to the Head of Place in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources Committee, the Chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, and the Chair of the Planning and Transportation Working Group to confirm that to Kent County Council that Swale Borough Council is content for the local nature recovery strategy to be issued for public consultation and, following the agreed process, then for publication. Members will have the opportunity to comment on the strategy itself during the consultation period, which is early next year. Agreement is also sought that this approach applies to all subsequent stages and local nature recovery refreshes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you. I will support this wholeheartedly. And I would like to put on the officer's radar that we are due to take ownership of Stones Farm Country Park, which includes ownership up to the middle of the stream for Tong Mill Stream, which is fed from Beckett Spring. And during the construction process, it has become clear that there has been a considerable amount of runoff from the site, in which the contractor, Chartway, failed to put proper preventative measures in place, so much so the EA had to step in, and as a result has dumped an awful lot of silt into that chalk stream and the mill pond. And now I think that area could really do with some work to enhance the biodiversity there. This is a rare habitat, chalk streams, and we are fortunate in the Swale that we have quite a few, and I think that would be something that this strategy could have a look at, as we would be an owner of part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Thank you. I'm very much in favour of the consultation. My only question is when do the sort of sites get put forward in the process? Is that as part of the consultation process, and does the council have a role in doing that, or is that entirely run by KCC in terms of choice of sites? But the strategy sounds fine.
Thank you. Emma, could you help us on that?
So the team at KCC, they've mapped the areas of particular importance for biodiversity. So that includes national conservation sites, nature reserves and local wildlife sites. And they've also mapped areas that could become of importance to try and provide connectivity and show where the greatest need for action is and where that could make the most difference. So KCC have put all that information together using central sources and local information. And we'll be able to feed into that process as part of the consultation in the new year.
Is that
Thank you.
information? Sorry,
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Is that information in the public domain as yet, or is that are we waiting for the consultation for that to appear?
It's not in the public domain at the moment, no.
Thank you. We'll keep our eye on it. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't entirely disagree with the approach. I think it's fine and sounds like a very worthy project. My question really is around whether we considered not delegating this and having these discussions in committees, given from reading 2.151, it sounds like that document is available now. So that exists and is available for consultation from stakeholders. So we could discuss it at this committee or full council next week or an upcoming environment committee. That is entirely possible. And the second draft is available in April, when we also have quite a lot of meetings. So it doesn't seem to me beyond the wit of this council that we could discuss it in a political situation and with councillors present. And that would be my preference, rather than delegating exclusively to our officers, who I know will do a fantastic job, but don't know every chalk stream of Faversham and the surrounding areas. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
It's going back to money, really, because it's, and I don't understand the legislation here under the Environment Act, but presumably where someone has permitted a decline, shall we say, will we be going back to them to seek funding to do some of this work? Or how will this be funded? Because one would presume if someone has allowed it to deliberately decline, then they should in effect pay. And the other thing is around biodiversity net gain. I think there's a lot of discussion about where that happens. It says the LNRS will have a spatial role in the biodiversity net gain. Is this going to be delivered on site? Because I think the worst thing that can happen is that biodiversity net gain is moved off site. When we talk about planning, is to make sure that those schemes are kept on scheme, i.e. not moved out of the borough or not moved out of a particular development site. They're delivered in situ.
Yeah, did you want to comment, Emma?
Just to say that, yeah, I'll make a note of that, and we can consider that as part of our consultation response in the new year.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not that I have a well, I have an interest. I have a direct interest ante. However, I do agree with Councillor Gibson that if we are a supporting authority, i.e. we're signing down the bottom line on it, then I actually do think that it would be better. That is the sort of thing that the committee should be grabbing hold of and putting the two penneth in, because Kent is very good at having a strategy. No, just sign. No, don't bother reading it, love. Just sign on the bottom line. And then you find out that you're committed to Christ knows what. So, sorry. I do think that, so I'd be quite happy to second, if that was a proposal, an amendment, Councillor Gibson, I'd be quite happy to second that, because I think that is the right way to go. Some places...
I think in the report, sorry, Councillor Harrison, I think in the report one of the issues there was on timings of it coming to the committee and getting the responses back. That was one of the difficulties. I'll let Natalie speak on it.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we only have 28 days to respond to say if we are content. And there is an awful lot of technical information that we have been sent, and even after we were sent the original technical information, they have been sending follow-up emails with revised technical information. So it would be too difficult with the committee system to share that with yourselves within the 28 days. And we're not committing to anything. It's purely to say we're content for it to go out for consultation, at which point we will be consulted, you know, along with all the other bodies and local authorities, and then we will consult with you at that stage to put in our response as a local authority to the full consultation. And we have arranged, I think as Emma's report says, for the lead officers at KCC to come and give a briefing to members here about the whole local...
Yeah, sorry, that was what I... Obviously, we're doing well here, this ESP stuff. I haven't got a problem with going off to consultation, but then we, as a council, a committee, environment probably, because it's the most specific, appropriate, should actually have our own consultation and put our own two penneth into it at the same time as Joe and Josephine are putting their two penneth in. Then, so that ultimately, when our name's at the bottom as a supporting authority, this authority has actually done their due diligence and made sure that whilst they took into account what people have told them, they've also took into account the views of the committee, who are from a wide range right across the piece. You know, there's enough expertise on that, and non-expertise, which is sometimes extremely useful. So I would be quite happy that because that didn't sound, reading the report, didn't sound the same as what Councillor Gibson suggested and was proposing as an amendment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So, yes, so for the actual consultation, we will share that with the wider council. This is purely to say we're content for it to go out to consultation. It's just a sort of, I mean, you could say it was a slight quirk of the government legislation.
Councillor Gold?
So this is about process rather than consultation at this point. And so, but I think it is absolutely vital that when the consultation happens, that the committee is scheduled in, and we need to think about sort of timings of things for that would be, I guess, what Councillor Gibson is saying, really, or not quite.
I'm broadly, sorry, Chair. I'm broadly asking for more of both. So we absolutely should have a consultation in the consultation period. I still don't think, whilst I accept it'll be technical and 28 days is not a huge amount of time, and there will be some issues where we cannot always arrange committee meetings in these decisions. In this one we can. It says quite clearly we had the document 2 weeks ago. Today is within 28 days of 2 weeks ago. We could have read it this week and made a decision tonight. We could also have done it next week for full council, and we still would have been within 28 days. So it's not that we shouldn't occasionally delegate things. We absolutely can and must. But in this instance, we didn't have to.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll move to the vote on this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Baldock, sorry.
Yeah, I have some sympathy with what Councillor Gibson's saying as well. If it's just process, why is all this information coming forward? You know, there's obviously information that makes sense to officers, may make sense to us, but it's always a lot easier to get an item considered at the beginning of a process than it is to try and insert it later. And if there are things like the chalk streams and other issues that we as a council think they should be including in their consultation, then that's where members, you know, should have that opportunity. And it's not difficult to call an emergency meeting. Any committee can be called within a week to consider something. It's not likely we'll be adding such reams that officers will be unable to, you know, respond due to all the things that councillors say. Mind you, I sometimes wonder about that. But yeah, I do kind of feel that the case is not made for it not to go to a committee.
Yeah.
Just to really try and provide some clarity that that we would be content in terms of that information has been provided to us by KCC, that they've provided us with a point of contact, that they've had regard for our information, and that we've been involved as an authority, and that our local data has been included. So that is the level of what content means in this instance.
So, and if we're
They can still go out to consultation even if we're not content.
lovely.
So there you are. I think we'll move. Councillor Gibson.
Sorry, just in the report, it doesn't. It says we are to be content that a named contact has been provided, but that is not in the report. So 214. That's not in the one I'm reading. Sorry. 214.
It is not a requirement of the sporting authorities. I read that as meaning even if we're not content, they go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I'm just saying the point. It says we are to declare that we are content that we have a named contact, and I am not reading a named contact, so it would be quite difficult for me to be content with that. In that, if you tell me you've got a named contact, I'm content, but I can't see that.
Yes. Right, I'll move this one to the vote then. Those in favour? Yeah, those are content. Those against? Oh, sorry, just hold your hands up a second.
Just check, is this for the consultation?
Yeah, it's a consultation for it to go to consultation.
With the committees? Or?
No. Just,
no.
No. Right. So those in favour? Again, do you just show your hands? Okay. Those against? And abstentions? One abstention.
Why would I vote for something that could kill me? Even for my residents, I won't.
Good. Billy, what was the final score then? 12?
12 for 1 abstention.
So that's passed 12-4 and 1 abstention. Thank you. We now move on to item agenda, and thank you, Emma. Move on to agenda item 8, which is in the hands of Jamil. Oh, okay. Just a little bit of housekeeping for a second. That was seamless, Jamil. Nobody noticed.
Is this? All right. Thank you, Chair.
Local heritage list has been, developing a local heritage list has been part of our adopted heritage strategy. And the work started in 2021, where we consulted on adopting listing criteria for local heritage list. And then following on from that, in the summer of 2023, we invited nominations from the public for local heritage list. And we received over 200 nominations, and officers prepared a supplementary list of approximately 100 assets from the historic environment record. On 17th October 2024, a selection panel was invited to agree the final list out of the short list created from the nominated assets and the historic environment record. A total of 278 assets were discussed by the selection panel, and the final list includes 149 heritage assets, which are appended as Appendix 1 on page 39 of the pack. And the recommendation is to agree the schedule of heritage assets proposed to be designated as local heritage assets based on the outcome of the selection panel meeting, and to note that the schedule of heritage assets proposed to be designated as local heritage has been developed in line with best practice guidance published by Historic England and will afford protection to a range of non-designated heritage buildings and structures within the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jamil. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I'd like to give my thanks to Jamil and all the officers involved in this. I think this has been an excellent project, something that other councils do, but which I think really adds to what we've got here in Swale. Providing that we do agree it tonight, I would really urge councillors to get out and publicise it, let people know about it. It brings up a lot of things that people might be interested in seeing that they might not know about. I think it's been a really useful exercise. I would like to add one recommendation, Chair. At the listing day, we did talk about repeating the exercise again next year. Jamil's keen to do that, so just to give her the authority to do so. I'd like to just put that in as a recommendation so we repeat the exercise next year.
I'll second that.
Are we all in favour of that? Those at the back? In favour of Jamil doing anything next year? I think that's sufficient for carry that one. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Then happy to move the other two recommendations.
Oh, just a small point about that money tree in the back garden that ain't there, Mr. Chairman. Before we're agreeing things which have resource implications for the future, perhaps we ought to be looking at what resources we've got to actually apply to them before we agree things. That's normally the way you work. You don't go down Tesco's not knowing that your purse is, you've got nothing in your purse and buy a trolley load of gear. You check how much money you've got before you go in there. It's just sort of the adult thing to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chair. To point, I agree with what Councillor Harrison just said, and I think that in terms of this actual exercise, it doesn't need to cost very much at all. We can use technology and other means to actually make this a really quite straightforward, simple process, hopefully. And apologies if this is my own ignorance on this. The list in here, can I just ask, and I hope it is, but I can't see it on there, whether it's on the other list, the Jubilee pump on the A2 in Tenham, and is that already registered as a heritage site? I thought it would have been under Tenham Parish Council. I know they own it, but if it's not, because the reason is we got a milestone a few yards up from it, from the Jubilee pump, but a huge historical significant item opposite the Dover Castle, which I'm hoping is on that list. Do you know if it is or isn't?
No, Jubilee Pump is not on the list. However, as Councillor Baldock said, we are calling another round of nominations. We're planning to do another round of nominations next year. So we'll definitely look it up. And are you sure it's not statutory listed? Because we can't have statutory assets which are already listed, statutory listed, are not. We cannot put them on our non-designated heritage list.
It's listed.
But I will check that. And
I think Tennant Parish Council got listed as Julie might know from also from the listed side. It's listed as an asset for the Tennant Parish Council already.
Yeah, perhaps that's something you could look at.
Yeah, but my only other comment, and again, I've got nothing against this at all, but it would be my only concern. And the example I'm going to use is the Odeon building, the old cinema, which absolutely is a heritage site. But we run the risk at times of allowing, if there's nobody in there and it's not being used, you just need to, even now, go down and look at it and you think, what a shame that it's not getting used. It's going to fall even further into disrepair, which makes it then even more difficult for somebody who might be interested in using it in due course to actually fork out and actually bring it up to the and could we be, I'm not saying it's not a heritage at all, but if there's anything which we potentially could do to make it more viable, easier, whatever, to make sure it stays to a certain standard, that it then doesn't get to a point of actually, yeah, it's a heritage, but we can't do anything with it. The best thing actually is to knock it down. And we really do not want to ever get into that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamil? Yeah.
What you've expressed concern about is exactly what local heritage designation on local heritage list will help support. So that means that it will be, if any application comes in for any changes to the cinema building, it will be a material consideration because it's a designated local heritage list. So there's less chance of us losing it completely. So we kind of maintain our heritage and also manage any changes that are proposed for making the use or reuse the building.
Just, I really get that. My only concern in that case is that only applies if a change comes in. If current owners of the building actually don't do anything about it, there's no change, actually it could still fall into rack and ruin. And again, it's such a huge shame.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Well, sadly, that's the case of our listed buildings as well. It's hard to get people to do. But the fact that it is on a list may help get some grant funding from some people. Some people might, some groups might have shown an interest, but otherwise, because they know it's got a listing, a local bit of protection, that guarantee that they won't be spending, granting money to something that will disappear in a couple of years. So it just helps a little bit.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks. On this, I can understand one of the good things about this is just to record the nature of local historic environment more accurately, which is all good doing it. But one of the alternative options at 4.3 is to agree an alternative list. So if there's things being raised now, such as the pump, surely we can say at this meeting to include that pump on this thing, not have to wait till next year, because it says alternative option is to agree a different list. So surely anything that we propose tonight could just be added. Is that the case or not?
I don't think the correct way to go. But Jamil, do you want to comment?
As per Historic England best practice, we should go through the selection panel if we are to designate new heritage assets. However, it's a slightly grey area in terms of Historic England guidance. It does say that the officers can also include an asset, because there are a number of times when a planning application comes in and there's a building of local character and you need to designate it as or identify it as a local heritage. So I think it's really up to the committee. We can add it if we vote, or we can, but we'll need to look at it if it's not statutory. We can only add it if it's not statutory listed, and or we can do it in the next round of selection panel.
Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Hunt, for the right. So what I would suggest in that case, because given also the history of the pump and the incidents that's occurred to it over a number of years, the fact it's been almost destroyed twice since over the last 15 years or so, can I suggest or propose then that checks or contact be made with the parish council and checks be made to see whether it is not on that list, and if it is not on that list, that we add a year delay. I don't want to run the risk of delaying it for a year, so I thought it was under the parish council, but if it's not, then make an exceptional case and add the Jubilee pump opposite the Dover Castle on the A2 to this list.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Councillor Baldock. Yeah, it is.
I know of it, and I think it is worthy of inclusion. We don't want to make a. I was talking to myself then. We don't want to make a big habit of this, but that is, as Councillor Brown said, quite a vulnerable bit of history. It has been. It's recognised as being of historic value. So I think, as a one-off, I would have supported it going on.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I just looked up on English, whatever it is, the listings. It's not classed as a listed building, so it's not. It hasn't got a listing, and I agree with Councillor Byrne and Councillor Baldock on that. In terms of its recognition, I'd be happy for that to be included tonight as an addition.
Okay, so you've heard the proposal on the floor. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? So that looks like 12-4 and one abstention. So that's carried. Thank you, members. Right, are we back to the substantive bit now, which is agreeing the schedule of heritage assets, and to note the schedule of heritage assets proposed to be. So could I have a proposer for those two? Yeah, and repeat the exercise, yeah. Seconded by Councillor Gibson. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? 12-4, one abstention. Thank you. Members, we'll do agenda item 9 and we'll have a break for 10 minutes, I think. Okay, agenda item 9, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. So Cellar Hill and Green Street Conservation Area. We've had 2 rounds of public consultation on this conservation area, and we've received 17 responses. In the first round of public consultation, Historic England came back and said that we should include extended part of London Road into the conservation area, which was formerly known as Green Street. And that's why we had to go back to public consultation and did the second round of public consultation in December 2023. In 2024, summer of 2024. Following on from that, now we have the conservation area with 6 different extensions to the boundary, which is shown on the map on page 171. of the document. So proposed boundary changes A, B, C, and D are proposed to more accurately reflect the current plot boundaries, or because the original boundary has no apparent context on the ground, and they involve minor changes where the original designation line no longer has relevance, possibly because of changes since the original designation. Proposed boundary E change is proposed to include the hedgerow, which fronts the west side of Cellar Hill. And hedgerows are identified as an important contributor to the character of Cellar Hill, so its inclusion within the conservation area is justified. Proposed boundary F, this proposed boundary change is to include numbers 4 and 6 Station Road. The semi-detached pair of houses predate the 1896 Ordnance Survey map, and they are well constructed in local yellow stock brick and include decorative stone detailing. And in addition to that, after the second consultation, we have now included London Road and parts of Linstead Street within the, Linstead Lane, within the conservation area. A number of local residents and parish councillors have suggested that numbers 8 to 40 Station Road and further west extension of London Road be included up to number 224 London Road. Both these terraces along Station Road and London Road could potentially be included in the extended conservation area. However, these properties have been much altered in the past and therefore are considered to be of lesser significance compared to the properties that are proposed to be included. If not included, these terraces would form part of the setting of the conservation area, which is a material consideration anyway in planning decisions. Additionally, Historic England in their response were very vocal about inclusion of Green Street stretch of London Road, but have not mentioned including numbers 8 to 40 Station Road. And this would be in keeping with the para 197 of National Planning Policy Framework, which advises that when considering the designation of conservation areas, local planning authorities should ensure that an area justifies such status because of its special architectural or historic interest, and that the concept of conservation is not devalued through the designation of areas that lack special interest. On 5th November 2024, a site visit was undertaken by members of the Policy and Resources Committee along with the council officers with a view to assess the two above-mentioned terraces at Station Road and London Road. Officers recommended that the two terraces be included in the local heritage list, thus giving them a status of non-designated heritage asset, which is what they would have if included in the conservation area. However, it was agreed that further consideration should be given at the committee meeting to the inclusion or otherwise of the two terraces. A third public consultation will need to be undertaken if the committee votes for both the terraces, number 8 to 40 Station Road and numbers 190 to 224 London Road, to be included. Another option would be to adopt the conservation area appraisal document up to and including number 196 London Road, add a note within the document to emphasize on contribution of the two terraces on setting of the conservation area, and nominate number 8 to 40 Station Road to be designated as local heritage. This would provide adequate protection to the two terraces, and the Cellar Hill and Green Street conservation area can be adopted without the need for a third public consultation. Therefore, our recommendation is to note the updated Cellar Hill and Green Street conservation area character appraisal and management strategy, and representations made by interested parties set out in the report appendices, to agree changes to the character appraisal and management strategy as identified in consultation response table and adopt this as planning guidance, to amend the boundary of the conservation area as shown in character appraisal and management strategy document, to redesignate the Cellar Hill and Green Street conservation area, and to consider whether number 8 to 40 Station Road and London Road westwards from numbers 190 to 224 be included. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Heritage Officer and also the consultant, Peter Bell, for this report. It's a really excellent piece of work, shows a very good understanding of the area, and there's been a lot of engagement with the local community. There have been, apart from the site visit this committee undertook, there have been 2 other site visits with parish councils represented and also local residents who have very good knowledge of the area. So I'd like to thank the officer for the community engagement. I fully support the minor extensions to the current conservation area. That's the ones marked A to F. And as the officer says, these include taking in 2 Victorian cottages in Station Road. Local residents are very keen, and as ward member, I agree with them, to see the inclusion of the Victorian terrace as a whole, so numbers 8 to 40 Station Road, because it's a very attractive range containing many original features. I'm afraid I don't agree with the Heritage Officer that they should simply be included in the local heritage list, i.e. to be non-designated heritage assets. I think they should be included in the conservation area itself. Similarly, I think the Victorian terraced houses to number 224 London Road should also be included, as they're really an essential part of the story that unfolds along the length of Green Street. At the moment, the proposal is for the conservation area to stop in the middle of this terrace, which doesn't make sense to me. It's more logical to extend it to the end of the terrace. I appreciate, as the officers outlined, this involves another round of public consultation and delays the adoption of the report, but I think it's more important to get it right. So I'd like to propose that these 2 terrace extensions are put forward for inclusion in the conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Lemon's curious about what the cost would be for that, and I said, well, quite minimal. To reconsult. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right, so once again, those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And the rest of the recommendations, 1, 2, 3 and 4, are we all happy to take those on block? Councillor Baldock.
I missed my chance to second it. I'm not going to miss my chance to... thanks to that unfortunate delay, I was going to suggest that you all, especially the tenant members, purchase 15 copies of this excellent report, which can be bought from the print room, as Christmas presents. But now you'll have to do it for Easter presents. And I will sign them for you if you like.
No, don't want to devalue them. Okay, so members, those in favour of, we'll take them all on block, 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, we'll take a short 10-minute interlude. So back for 5-2. Thank you. Right, members, welcome back. Thank you. We'll continue with the business, which is agenda item 10, and that's in the hands of Steph.
Good evening, everyone. Earlier this year, this committee agreed the funding for the Swale Good Causes Community Lottery. The project team are progressing plans to be able to launch the lottery, and as part of this process, we must apply to the Gambling Commission for an operator's licence. And as part of this, we need to submit a series of different policies to demonstrate that we can safely and effectively manage the lottery. This includes the need to have in place a lottery-specific anti-money laundering and proceeds of crime and terrorist financing policy. Although the Council does have an existing counter-fraud and corruption policy which is being reviewed, this doesn't cover what would specifically be required by the Gambling Commission for the purposes of our operator's licence application. The policy, as shown as part of the report, has been developed with support from our contracted external lottery management company and is based upon best practice from other local authorities running good causes lotteries. So this committee is therefore asked to approve this good causes lottery anti-money laundering policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wise. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, can I just check? So the anti-money laundering policy, although we're bringing it forward because of the community lottery scheme, presumably that would apply anyway across the council.
No, this is specifically for the Good Causes Lottery. I believe other officers are working on sort of the revisions to the more generic council-specific money laundering policy.
Okay, good, because I do think that needs to be enacted as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, much to the previous item about the named officer, that it is highlighted that we need to name an MLRO. Have we named one, and if so, who are they?
That's something we're still sort of deciding in-house, but yeah, we certainly will have a in-house within sort of, yeah, within officers, but yeah, that will be agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Same point, thank you.
Okay, so we've had a proposal from Councillor Palmer. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bowen, sorry.
That's right, just to double check on that last point. So are we expecting this named person, the money laundering reporting officer, whoever it's going to be, is that going to be incorporated into someone's existing role, or are we looking at a new post? Because if it's a new post, it can cost. So I presume it's current resourcing.
Yeah, Steph?
Yeah, no, it would be part of an existing role.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, those in favour? Those against? So we've got one less this time, so it'll be 11. No, that's what I'm saying, we've got one less, so 11 and 1 it should be then, the figure-wise, isn't it?
No, Alistair was never in the figures in the first place because he's not.
Okay, right. Thank you. So that's carried 12 and 1. Thank you. Now agenda item 11, which for changes in the hands of Steph.
So as explained with the previous item, as part of our Gambling Commission operator's licence for the Good Causes Lottery, there are obviously these policies that we need to submit about how we're going to run the lottery. That also includes having a specific operator's gambling policy. And although we do have a gambling policy linked to how we run our licensed gambling premises, that policy doesn't cover, again, what will be required by the Gambling Commission. So again, the policy as part of the appendix of this report item has been developed based upon best practice and with support from our external lottery management company. And again, the committee's asked to approve this operator's gambling policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Candle's proposing. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Palmer. Are those in favour? Those against? 12 for, 1 against, so that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Steph. Now move on to agenda item 12, which is a mid-year report. I've got Tony Potter online. Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the performance monitoring report for the first 6 months of the current financial year, which members are being asked to note, please. And for those who are familiar with the usual layout of this report, there's also some additional monthly trend data for 2 indicators that were impacted by the new waste contract at the start of this financial year. The appendix shows the combined result of 18 monthly and 10 quarterly indicators, with 5 indicators 18% being red, 2 indicators 7% being amber, and 21 indicators 75% being green. This is then represented by 2 graphs split between monthly and quarterly indicators, and followed by the detail relating to the 5 red indicators and the 2 amber indicators. Lastly, there is an overview of all the KPI performance year to date, along with performance of indicators that we monitor. This includes specific monthly values for percentage of abandoned calls and missed bins, being 2 of the 3 performance indicators that were impacted by performance following the implementation of the new waste contract. These demonstrate that performance has been improving since the initial start-up problems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, please.
So, obviously it's to note, so nothing to propose, but just my, I believe, a repeated request that if the I in I am means informal, it probably doesn't need to appear in our agenda or administration minutes or anything. Obviously, officers can consult with whoever they like to achieve whatever balance they want to achieve, but there's no requirement for that to be a formal part of the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, not see anybody else indicating, so those in favour of noting. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 13, which is update of the commissioning and procurement policy. I think that's Claire. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The Procurement Act 2023 comes into force in February 2025, and as such we need to update our procurement and commissioning policy to ensure that we continue to procure goods and services in a legally compliant manner. This is therefore also an opportune moment to update the policy and ensure it is up to date in all appropriate ways. The policy changes are therefore slightly beyond just the legislative ones, as we've also updated any reference to the cabinet system, updated reference to the corporate plan, and also reflecting the updated national procurement policy statement. As well as updating the policy, this report also requests that any future legislative or governance changes be delegated to the monitoring officer in consultation with the leader. The consultation can currently be amended in this way for such changes, resulting in our constitution and the policy diverging until such changes to the policy are agreed by committee. It will also reduce the instance of reports coming to committee over which members really have no choice in their decision. Non-legislative or governance changes would still be brought to committee, and if legislative changes created any fundamental change, we would also bring that here for noting. In terms of the procurement process and changes resulting from the new Act, the main change is a move away from what is known as a MEAT procedure, the most economically advantageous tender, to a MAT procedure, just the most advantageous tender. And this is intended to provide clarity that a broader view can be included in the evaluation of tenders in assessing value for money. The Act also adds a greater reporting burden on contracts that are awarded under this Act, and we will be delivering on those as appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Yeah, I just a general observation really, but I feel that we should be factoring social value as a specific item rather than including it within quality. I know that our tenders, our practices vary, but I think it should be recognised, and I think as a council we should do some work on how we can ensure that we enable local companies to be able to bid for our contracts, and also know how to demonstrate social value. It may not be possible as under this item today, as we've got to agree it by 24th of February. But I think we need to look at why so many of our smaller businesses aren't applying for some of our work, but also how we can square that with demonstrating social value. So I think it's something we should take forward.
Thank you. Lisa, do you want to?
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to speak and I've got a mint. So we have engaged with our smaller local businesses. Charlotte in the procurement team has run several workshops to try and understand the position of why local businesses are not bidding, and it was quite a good take up, but the position we don't know is improved, but we haven't had. I've asked for specific feedback from small companies that have not been successful, but we have not had any of that feedback yet. But also the social value criteria does not kick in until a higher value contract, so it shouldn't impact the smaller businesses that are bidding for smaller contracts as a disincentive for applying, because it is intended for higher and bigger contracts where the social value element doesn't impact on the deliverability for smaller businesses.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a minor point on this. Councillor Harrison will hopefully remember this as well, or hopefully my memory is right. On page 242.13 about the real living wage, my memory serves, and there's only a few people, so Councillor Harrison here, maybe Councillor Hunt, I can't remember. This council at a budget meeting way before 2019 had a bit of a Barney with the administration at the time, even from these benches, on the real living wage. It was at the budget meeting where I am sure we actually voted to have it. It was a budget meeting where actually the leader wasn't there. You remember it? And I think you're looking around 2013-14 time. It was some time ago, but I'm pretty sure it was certainly before 2019. Just a point of information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester.
Sorry for my tardiness this evening, Leader. Sorry about that. And thank you for all the members that have shown concern for me this evening. I appreciate that. I just wanted a little bit of clarity, because obviously the papers say safeguarding concerns don't kick in until contracts of 30,000. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit, or one of the officers could expand a little bit around safeguarding for contracts under 30,000. Does it a little bit in the paperwork, but I think it would be useful to highlight what happens for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, could you? Nope.
Can you tell me what page that's on, please?
Page 15.
15.
Point number 73.
Yes, right there. Yeah, go on.
So yeah, the 30,000 limit means that it applies to all contracts over that value, regardless of how much kind of contact there is with the public. Part of the awarding the contract, it's assessed how much contact there is, and then a level is applied at which we ask the contractor to evidence. For those under 30,000, as it says there, it's a consideration of the service manager, and it would be contract specific. So if it's the delivery of a contract, even a low value one that has a lot of contact with vulnerable persons, vulnerable customers, they would be liaising with the safeguarding team and making sure that there are appropriate arrangements in place.
So just to follow that up a little bit, I've never seen it look like that with a bronze, silver, gold. What I'm concerned about, obviously, is the public perception of we would be limiting safeguard depending on how much contract is worth. now that you've explained it, I completely understand it. I'm not sure if bronze, silver, gold is potentially the way to label that in that manner to avoid all kind of misconceptions regarding that. But thank you for explaining it.
I'll take advice from other officers as to whether that's a sort of industry standard, whether you use the bronze, silver, gold word, or whether that is something that we could review.
That would be brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, members, I'll take both recommendations. Can I have a proposal? Councillor Baldock's proposing, seconded Councillor Harrison. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much indeed. Right, agenda item 14, and that's back in the hands of Claire, I think.
Thank you. So this report shows the expected 2024-25 financial position based on activity to the end of September and forecasts for the remainder of the year. Members will recall that the budget for 24-25 includes a take from the budget contingency reserve of £733,000 in order to be in balance for the year. Current forecasts suggest that the take from reserves will be £27,000 less than planned, so we'll be taking 706,000 from the reserve at the year. We've just gone bust, apologies. Table 1 of the main report shows the variances per department, and Appendix 1 to the report breaks this down further. Any variances in Appendix 1 of £20,000 or more are explained within the main report. Through changes made in setting the budget for 24-25 and some subsequent variance analysis, the totals per department are now largely appropriate for the services being delivered, so variances at departmental level are smaller than we've previously seen. This should lead, we hope, to improved financial management and accuracy of forecasting going forward. There are two main areas of overspend predicted for 24-25. The first is within the revenues and benefits line, with a forecast overspend of £241,000. Most of this overspend relates to the cost of supported accommodation, where local authorities are not able to fully recover the cost of housing benefit payments for support services in non-charity accommodation. This has been identified as an ongoing budget pressure, and £200,000 growth has been included in the draft budget for 25-26. Planning services are currently forecast to overspend by £575,000. It should be noted that this is likely to increase due to the call-in of the Highstead Park application, which could incur considerable costs. The planning forecast overspend has three main causes. Income from land charge searches has fallen due to a change in the process, as well as a reduced demand. The net overspend expected from land charges in 24-25 is £70,000. The reduced level of income will be an ongoing pressure and has therefore been added to the draft budget presented later this evening. Planning appeals are forecast to overspend by an estimated £127,000. This is a mixture of work required to defend appeals and court costs awarded against us. It's now believed that we will require a greater ongoing budget for the cost of appeals, so growth has been included in the 25-26 draft budget, although not at the level of this forecast overspend. Whilst planning income is now doing well against budget, the Development Management Service is predicted to overspend by £380,000. There are long-standing recruitment difficulties within this area. The restructure earlier this year has helped, and appointments are continuing to be made to posts, but there are currently a number of posts being filled by interim staff, which brings with it higher costs. There are certain posts that are proving particularly difficult to recruit to, so the senior managers within planning are considering how else these posts could be filled or what could be done to aid recruitment. Offsetting these overspends is a projected underspend on corporate overheads and capital financing of £773,000, and this is made up of a few areas of underspend. After an extensive exercise to rebase salary budgets and following on from negotiations last year on pension back funding, combined savings of £380,000 have been identified. Where these are considered ongoing, these savings have been built into the draft budget already for 25-26. There are further savings being realised from the retendering of the insurance contract, and again, ongoing savings here have been factored into the 25-26 draft budget. And lastly, interest received on our investments is still much higher than budgeted for, with interest rates remaining high. As rates are expected to continue falling, this should be considered as a windfall. However, we will do further modelling work to forecast potential interest costs and receipts to to see whether any temporary savings can be built into the budget. In terms of capital, we've spent £5.6 million in the first 6 months of the year, which represents 23.83% of the budget. Details of the spend per project are provided in Appendix 2. The main area of spend so far has been the purchase of houses for temporary accommodation, with further spend expected on that project over the rest of this year. We do know that we will receive income from contract penalties throughout this year. However, it's been suggested that this penalty income is used to fund corresponding work in future years, and as such, we request approval for any such income received this year to be transferred to reserve at year end and used to fund the work in future years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
So on two questions really. One on that point, and I suspect it's a difference of accounting understanding in that I don't understand and you do. But just that over those penalty fees, to me it would appear logical that the excess that receipt should go against the budget line where we are overspent on the budget in this particular bit where the environment we are over budget, and we are getting some of that money back. So it would seem to me that would have an internal logic to it if some of that penalty accounted for that over budgetness and the rest was moved to reserves, which I completely support, and I think that's sensible. You're going to tell me there's a really obvious accounting reason why we can't do that, but that's my logic. And my question really is on 3.9. I wonder if we could have a little bit more detail on how we've made more money from Swale House, because as far as I'm aware, we've not done anything. There are no new people in, but I might have missed something, so that'd be helpful to understand. Thank you.
So in terms of that penalty income, at the moment we're not forecasting an overspend within that service, so it wouldn't be used to offset an overspend. What we would do is put it into a reserve so that next year it can pay for sort of work to make sure that service is continually monitored, and that we're holding the contractor to the standard that we expect. In terms of Swale House, we do have tenants now in on the first floor. We've got 2 tenants, and so that's where we're now getting some additional income.
So I'll just bring Joanne in quickly if I can, Claire.
Thank you, Claire. We were pleased at the start of September to welcome both EKC Group and BMIX as new tenants to the building. So that's the reason for the uplift. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Just in case anybody doesn't understand, could you explain why on business rates we forecast 11 million, we got 23 million, and we're forecasting it'll be down to 11 million again?
Yeah, it's the actuals to date. So we collect it all and then we distribute it. Yeah, so that's at a point in time when we've had that amount of money and we have to pay it out to all the preceptors. So it's not our money to keep, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did raise this before. I can't honestly. I know some people agreed, but I don't know that it ever got written down. And that was this business of the way the committees work. Quite apart from the fact that we've got 5 service committees, and really we could be doing with 3. There was the issue of committees actually managing their own budgets rather than the parent sorting it out for them, because. I know when we had the committee system before, committees had a budget and you worked within it. You didn't say, well, we didn't get enough income in, so can you give us some more money, please, P&R. It was you didn't get enough money and you got to cut something from people. And, you were responsible. The committee was responsible. And we've got like a hybrid where the committees are doing bits and pieces. Environment's doing that huge scrutiny thing on the waste contract, which is great, but scrutiny is part and parcel of what a committee should be doing. in the same way is budget management. It should be part and parcel of what a committee should be doing. So I'm just sort of flagging it up against, just in case you think I've forgotten it, because I haven't forgotten it. I shall keep on and on and on till you all give in, because I am right on this, I know. Might be a slightly press 2 buttons instead of 1, Lisa, but I could help you there. But we managed before, we can manage again. And certainly going forward, you know, we have got reduced resources. We need to actually start living within our means, as I keep saying, and I shall keep saying it till I'm blue in the face, because that is the only way that members will actually understand financial responsibility. If you've got, you know, all the time you can pass it up the line and P&R's got to find it, and, oh, well, no, Lisa will find it somewhere in the back pocket. Well, you know, something's got to give somewhere, Chair, and I really think that we need to gird our loins and actually start looking at this properly and seriously, and none of this crap about, oh, well, we might not be here in 2 years' time, so why bother, and why not spend every halfpenny in the bank? No, let's be responsible and presume that we, in some form or another, will be continuing in the future, and we want to hand something decent over to the people that come after us, whether it's in Swale or a greater this or a greater that or a greater the other little bit of Kent.
I think I got the message.
Great, thank you, Chair. That was not quite a rant, by the way. I'm calming down.
Councillor Worcester, please.
I'll have a rant then.
Go for it, girl.
Thanks very much. I'd really like to have a think about these documents coming in a new form, which is laid out so that they are easy to read per committee. I think it would be much easier for people to read, especially members of the public. And I'd also like to go back to the subject of enforcement. This is an area that the public are absolutely crying out for. We've seen some good response from enforcement around Sheerness in terms of, may only be a little bit, but this is the area that we're absolutely calling out for. And another radical bit of an idea is that Swale Borough Council stop chasing things like court action that we will never ever get our money back from. So rather than doing things for the pure moral aptitude of the thing, we actually look at our budget and say, can we afford that? Is that going to give us what we want as an outcome? And really look at that, in fact, because we have had a fair number of things go to court recently, and we may have won, but we've absolutely not washed our face with regards to our costs and things like that. And what tipped me over was looking at the appeals issue. We have got some very good things that need robust defence, absolutely. But I think we need to be really careful that we are not using taxpayers' money. We need return, and we need their services to be retained. That doesn't happen if our budget doesn't work, does it?
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. Well, as I said earlier, you know, if central government didn't come and trample all over local democracy, some of those costs wouldn't have to be spent. But the good news is that regeneration and economic development are doing pretty well. And I'd like to commend the officers, because we were told this building, well, we know what this building's like, but there have been changes. They've brought back changes, first of all, to the working environment for officers, which I think is marvellous. It's been a great impact, working environment on the second floor. But letting it out, we were point blank told there is no market, which I didn't believe. And there clearly is, and we've got 2 tenants in who are paying rent, and I think that's brilliant. And I think it's good for the building to be better occupied, to have a higher occupancy. It also has a little ripple effect, one would hope, in that if there's more footfall in this building, then there's more people spending closer to the high street. So I think it's a little win. It's not huge, but it's income generation. It's what we should be pursuing where we can, and try and be creative about how we can do that. And I'd like to say well done to the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
I do have some sympathy with what Angela says about about committee responsibility. It would be a more democratic, a more transparent way to set our budgets, to ensure that we had, say, 20% reductions that we needed to implement, and it was down to the committees to come up with proposals of how those figures could be met. However, so much of what we do is, cross-committee really, that you would get things put under one committee that impacts on another committee. You'd also have our directorates aren't set up in line with our committees, so that would be quite difficult. I think it's something that we could look at going forward, because it gives people buy-in to the budgetary process over the year. It does make people feel responsible for decisions they're making. But, as I say, I think it would probably take quite a lot of rejigging of our directorates, and hey, that would probably cost money.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Lisa just went a bit even more paler than there. I also actually, and I agree, it will be a challenging thing to do. I agreed about a year ago with Councillor Harrison on that. That actually, I do find that some of the requests from committees, aside from taking the hard and difficult work behind it, that it's almost we'll ask P&R to do it because we'd like to do that, but actually it's their problem, get them to solve it. So I'm all right, Gov. We sound really great. We want to do this. But the actual hard decision needs actually taken here. And I agree with what Councillor Worcester just said, but with the caveats that yes, absolutely the budget and budget implications of the cost should be absolutely the forefront of on page 1 of helping our decision making. But sometimes, just occasionally, there is actually the desire from the public that actually it may not be the right thing budget from a financial point of view, but actually that's what morally the public wants us to do. And we shouldn't lose sight of that at times, but that so yes, the costs are hugely important, but that's not the only factor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baldock.
I would just like to point out that we win over 90% of our appeals. I think it's actually quite a lot higher than that, but I'm not going to go on record saying how much higher it is. And, we go to appeal when the committee decides that something isn't right, that they want to, it doesn't go to appeal. The committee rejects it, and then, the appellants appeal it. I would be very worried if we were running a planning committee that wasn't turning down poor designs or poor applications because we were feared about the monetary aspects, because that would be a really bad message to send out. It would be like, well, come and put forward whatever you want, and they won't turn it down because they're frightened of the costs. Planning is one of the most important things that we do. It affects many of our residents, if not all of them. And okay, we have this unwelcome interference that has been going on for many years in the planning process, but the planning committee makes measured decisions. Everything that goes to the planning committee is against officer recommendation, because if everybody agrees with the officers, it doesn't go to the planning committee. So anything that's called in, there is a reason that somebody doesn't think it's right. And if the planning committee agrees with that reason, then it's absolutely right that we should fight it. And I think, apart from Highsley Park, and I think that our officers do a really good job in the reports. The reports have improved and tend usually to do a good job at appeal. So I'll say we win over 90% of them.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that point, because I can recall coming to as a visitor to a planning committee and saying, members, the officers are recommending approval. There are no good planning grounds to refuse it. If you refuse it, you're playing to the gallery. Not me, Gov, oh, that nasty old inspector has made the decision. Well, that's what you did. You played to the gallery. It went to the inspector, and that was what, 240, 250 grand cost to us. Now, I sat here many moons ago, and I said, I don't agree with this, Mr. Chairman. If the ward councillor is prepared to propose refusal, I will second refusal. And I'm prepared, this shows how long ago, I'm prepared to put up my 5 grand as the costs. Because in those days we were surcharged. And if you made what were considered to be spurious and vexatious decisions, the cost was on the councillor and not on the council, okay? So on that occasion, I said, right, I'm prepared to stump up. And I'm sure the people in the gallery who are against this will do the same thing. The people in the gallery all looked at the floor, and the local councillor said, well, no. So I thought, well, fair enough. I was prepared to put my money where my mouth is, because that's what you had to do in them days. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, is what colours my judgment. I don't do things to play to the galleries. I do it based on the facts before us and the professional advice that is given to us. Unfortunately, from what I have seen over the past, let's say 9, 10, 15 years, that has not been happening. People have been playing to the gallery, and then after the event, it's, well, okay, that horrible planning inspector's given them permission. Go and tell them we need this, that and the other. Well, it's too late now, love. You should have negotiated that before. So what, the point is, we're not doing the best thing by our taxpayers by not explaining that actually there ain't no grounds. But what we can do is do our best to mitigate, and that is what your job is. That is what your job is. Because at the end of the day, when you look at how much we are handing over to developers who don't need the money, let's be fair, that's the penalty that we're getting. We're putting the tuppence halfpenny on the waste contractor, but the penalties we are paying to developers because we will not, explain to residents that actually there ain't no grounds, so it's got to go forward. So how can we mitigate? Tell us what you want, and let's try and negotiate. So that is on us. And I think I get the point that Councillor Worcester was making. If you ain't got a cat in hell's chance of winning that appeal, I'm not talking about really moral things. I'm talking about, because it's getting to be a habit, isn't it? No, we don't want that.
Okay, I'm going to wind it up.
But I do think that we should, I'm not saying we should look at a cost-benefit analysis of every single appeal, but I think it's got to be in there somewhere, because as I say, we haven't got unlimited funds. We don't know how much this heisted is going to cost us. I'm not suggesting anything on
Right,
this.
okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I just want to talk about planning. And
no, this isn't, the subject isn't planning.
No, on budget. But just the one point I do want to point out is that we don't get costs because we go to appeal and go against officers. We get costs because of unreasonable behaviour. And that is the point that we need to stop doing, is start being a bit more reasonable and come up with decent decisions of why we're going to be refusing things. This cost does need to go down. I think all committee members and everyone on the council, in case it ever comes up, has to have a look at all the appeals that we do have. Every single time we've got costs, it's usually, I would say, the committee that have made those decisions. Officers very rarely get costs against any of the decisions they do, even if they've lost appeals. This cost could easily come down, and all members need to make note and the reasons why it's happening.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester.
I do take everybody's point, but I just wanted to make sure that we also look at this in the round as well. Yes, planning is the bigger portion of it, absolutely. But there are other departments of the council where we regularly end up in court. It's our officers' time, it's our money that we're using to get cases together, goes through the whole rigmarole of the thing, and then suddenly we get very little back, get the absolute I'll use ship on shore as the obvious example. Take somebody to court, take somebody to court, take somebody to court. It's the obvious answer, isn't it? However, what made the difference was Swale turning that into a pan display. Residents have very short memories regarding that particular car park. I don't. And actually, I look at officers and I think, could our time be better spent thinking of answers to these problems that are out of the box? Is court always the way? I don't think it is. I don't think we get the return on it that people think we do. And planning, I completely agree. I can only put it in there that it's a worry for me. It's not my committee, but I can tell you that it's not just planning, it's other areas as well. I think we all need to be mindful of our decisions. Thanks, Chair.
Right, I'm going to move this one on then to the vote. So,
Mr Chairman, can I propose that we move to the agree to note recommendations 1 and 2 and agree item number 3 and move to the vote if somebody would second that.
thank you. Have we got a second? Councillor Wise. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, move on to item 15. And this is in the hands of Claire for a change.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the update of the state debt policy. Council collects money in a number of ways, including invoicing where payment is not made in advance or at the point of service. Invoicing relating to services other than council tax, business rates or housing benefit overpayments is known as sundry debt and is therefore covered by this policy. The policy sets out the requirements for raising invoices to customers, the processes that we will follow to ensure payment is received, and the options open to us where payment is not forthcoming. Recognising that sundry debt varies greatly, from an invoice for printing work up to large Section 106 agreements, it's important that any necessary recovery work is proportionate to the level and the type of debt. The current policy was last reviewed in 2019. There have been a number of changes since then, so the policy has been reviewed to make sure that we're making the best use of the resources and the technology currently available to us. The policy includes a focus on the finance team and the relevant service department working side by side on debt collection, allowing us to maximise but also protect existing relationships between the service department and the customer. It also introduces a mechanism to escalate any cases where there is inaction to avoid delays in payment wherever possible. As part of the report, we also request delegation to the Deputy Head of Legal to make changes to this policy where they result from legislative or constitutional changes, ensuring that the policy and the Constitution remain aligned. This reduces the need for reports to be brought to committee to make changes over which there is really no choice. Again, any major amendments resulting from changes to legislation would still be reported to this committee for noting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bonney. Thank you. Are those in favour? Oh, do you want to speak to... Yeah, okay.
Where we're delegating changes to policy, minor ones to officers, I'm quite conscious that we've done this elsewhere on the agenda tonight, and you'll say you'll come back to the committee with the major changes, but all over the place we're getting incremental changes, and I think it's very difficult for members to keep tabs on what's changed and where. If we can have a log next to the Constitution, logging what has changed and when, then it will make it much easier for members to keep track and to visit that site. Because I'm just conscious that we delegate all this stuff and it's done and we are not informed, and then when we go to, we'll be told, oh, well, that's in the Constitution or it's in this other document that's changed. And we've got no way of seeing when that change occurred because it's been done through a delegation. I think it is important we keep on top of that.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. This is normal. We may have done it already tonight, but we've done it over the past however many years I've been here. We do it on the Housing and Health Committee with our housing policies. Major stuff, the committee looks at, but in there, instead of the staff will change it. Instead of the Housing Act of Plan and Land Act of 1980, which affected actually I think that was the right to buy. It's now the Housing Act of I was going to say 1924, 2024. Now, I don't want that to the committee, and I think I've got enough of a brain when I read it to say, you know, oh, this has been amended following the 2024 Act, because it's actually in there. So those are the sort of minor things that are done, I'm not going to say day by day, but year by year, because that's automatic. I don't need to be notified, and I don't need a note at the side of it, because when I read that document, it will say amended by the 2024 Act or the 2023 Act or whatever. I'm just thinking of extra work on that website. They're always problematic, aren't they? So, anything more major.
Lisa.
Yeah, I think the reason that we are asking for that delegation is because members have previously not been happy with us bringing things to you where you've got no choice. So it's to capture that. Yeah. So that's what the delegation is for. It's not to change a policy in its principles or the spirit of it is literally where we've got changes where you can't approve against them.
Thank you. Councillor Bonny.
I don't have a problem with that. I think it's just understanding that the change has been made when we look at it. We have no idea, was it done 3 months or 6 months ago? And how substantial was that change? I think we have to be able to keep tab. We own that. It's our documents at the end of the day. But we do need to know if those changes have been done. The other option is that they could just email as a notification, this has been updated. But that's going to become a burden. Why not just put a note on the side and say it was updated on this date?
Yeah, something we can look at, that's for sure. Okay, so we've had it proposed by Councillor Baldock, seconded by Councillor Bonny. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. We move on to item 16, which is in the hands of... Oh, it's you, Lisa, is it? Fantastic. I was just going to stitch Claire up with it.
So this report presents the administration's draft budget proposal for 25-26. The revenue position is currently reporting a budget gap of just over 1.5 million, which is proposed to be funded from reserves. The gap increases to over 5 million in 28-29 if savings are not found to bring the gap between the planned income and expenditure down. As I've advised previously, this position is not sustainable and our reserves will fall below sustainable levels by 27-28. And we will effectively go bust. The budget includes estimates for 25-26 government grant funding being the same as the current year and removes one-off grants that should have ended several years ago from 26-27. This accounts for nearly £2 million of the budget gap from 26-27. So there is a risk with the assumptions at the moment with the unknown government settlement, which we are hoping to receive in the run-up to Christmas. There is currently no additional cost built in for the proposed increases to employers' national insurance, as the Chancellor's budget included an offset for public bodies for that to increase. We don't have the details yet, and again, the budget will be reviewed when the funding position is announced. There is also now no allowance in for the income due to councils for the initiative that aims to transfer the cost of collecting and disposing of recycling waste to the organisations that are responsible for producing it, known as EPR. It's the Extended Producer Responsibility. Again, this is something that was due to be rolled out sooner than it has and been delayed until 25-26. We still don't know the methodology for payments or the requirements of local authorities on the back of the legislation. And so the report does not include any assumptions for the funding that is due to us. We also don't know at which level it's going to be allocated, whether it's going to go to the county and us with a prescribed allocation, or whether it's going to go to the county with no prescribed allocation, or whether we're going to get it separately. But as our base budget and our budget gap already includes costs that have been built in for our increased waste and recycling collection, any additional funding that we do receive from this funding source will help maintain, balance that gap position. The uplift for business rates for 25-26 is based on the September CPI figures, which was 1.7%, which was the lowest CPI figure that we've had for the year, and it's now gone up again. But that means our uplift on our business rate income will be set limited to the 1.7% before any growth is built in. But obviously our costs are going to be higher than that because inflation is actually running higher than that for pay assumptions and for our other contract assumptions. This is another example of where our income increases are limited to a lower amount than our costs are increasing at. We've allowed inflation at between 2 and 3% of our costs. The same assumption have generally been used for fees and charges unless cost recovery principles have been applied, with some rounding to make the amount sensible. Specific increases have been applied for some fees, and Appendix 5 shows the full list of the proposed fees and charges for 25-26. Addressing an audit recommendation from last year's external audit, the report shows the impact of a 1% change to the inflation assumptions on our contract cost base. A summary of the cost of the growth, savings and income changes are reported in Appendix 3. The capital programme, Appendix 4, shows no new schemes have been added to the programme since 24-25, but some reprofiling has been required as schemes have progressed and delivery assumptions changed. Appendix 6 details the risks for the budget. One that has increased its profile is in the reduction of funding from KCC. As some of you may be aware, their current budget proposals include a saving on the termination, their words, of grants to districts to support council tax reduction schemes and collection. Kent Finance Officer Group has written to KCC to advise that the consequences of the saving will impact on all of our council tax bases, with an estimated cost to KCC of over £9 million based on 24-25 figures to save 1.5 million. I have also written to our own members that are KCC members to help challenge this proposal, given the losses that will arise from the savings. So it will not just impact us, KCC, fire, police, and parishes, although their precept total amount will change. With the reducing the tax base, the increase per Band D it will be higher because there are less properties to spread the cost over. As I've already said, the provisional settlement is expected near Christmas, and the budget will be updated to reflect any changes arising from that and any other changes that we are informed of that will impact our budget position. The council tax base position as a result of the KCC P&R this morning, which did not make any recommended changes to the proposal to cut the district grants, is that we were going to be reducing our tax base collection by 1%, because if we have to reduce our resourcing to collect our council tax, we will have to increase our bad debt provision effectively. There is a cost to us on that position, but it is eightfold for KCC.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to move the recommendations of noting and to go to the consultation. That doesn't mean to say I agree with what's in the budget. That will come out at later dates. But one question, actually staying on that, I look forward and I hope we get a good response rate from the public on this, because I will be very interested to see what they think in terms of some of the increases that's going to hit their pockets, particularly in the car parking. But that's for another night, probably in February. But one question I do have, and I don't know whether you can help with this, Lisa. On the page 319, the cost for the projected cost for the information technology this year, 1,339,000. Next year, a 90,000 increase year, and then 26-27 over 100,000 on top of that. Do we have any other information in terms of what that is actually for? And as I've mentioned before a couple of times, is surely there could be potentially some efficiencies there, and in terms of moving over to other means of recording data, i.e. through SharePoint and things like that, because it just if we're using antiquated technology and means to operate, then that's going to have a bigger cost, and seems like actually there's near which could be saved.
So this is both the cost of the IT team and the technology. The newer technology costs more in revenue terms, because the old technology was mostly capital based. So the move to the cloud and increased uses of things like AI, not specifically built into this, but it is more expensive in revenue terms. So even if it's more efficient, it's more expensive.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, please.
So I'm happy to second Councillor Bowen's proposal with the identical caveats, but my question is around on Appendix 1, the planning row. I'm just checking if there's an explanation for why we're more than doubling and then falling right back again in the longer term projections. That would be helpful to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one-off costs for the local plan.
Okay, thank you. So I've had a proposer and Councillor Bowen, seconder Councillor Gibson, Charles Gibson that is. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask if I can indulge you for an extension to standing orders. We may or may not need it, but thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, here we go.
Sorry, Chair, was that a proposal to suspend standing orders because you think the business will be completed by 10:30 as per the Constitution?
Absolutely, Councillor Harrison.
Fine, okay.
Moving on then, agenda item 17, which is just recommendations for approval from the Joint Transportation Board. Agreed. Agreed, okay, thank you. Item 18, which is the forward decisions plan. You agree with that? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 19, which is a South Thames Gateway Building Control Partnership. And I'll hand over to Joanne for this. And I'll remind you there's an exempt paper underpinning this as well. And if we need to make any reference to that, then we'll have to go into private session.
Before we go into private session, do we have to go mention that this is even going to be considered? Yeah, additional action. Or do we have to come out to public, private and vote again?
Yeah, it sounds like we've got to come out and come back in again. Yeah.
Really?
Mm. The different items. Councillor Lehman.
Can I just check? I've received an additional item which is number 23, and I haven't seen a 22, unless 22 is a proposal to move into private session. Okay, thank you. I thought it might be.
Okay, thank you. Joanne.
Thank you very much, Chair. So members will be aware of this as a report that appears annually around about this time, following the South Thames Gateway Building Control Joint Committee's approval of the draft rolling business plan for the following 4 years. STGBC is the partnership arrangement through which we discharge our statutory building control functions. The report in front of you includes that draft plan as an exempt appendix and invites members to comment on the draft, with those comments to be fed back to STGBC Joint Committee to inform the final version. As has been the case in recent years, the business plan continues to set out the pressures to which it is responding. These are summarised in section 2.4 of the report. They principally relate to a shrinking market due to the rise in approved inspectors or private sector competition, which in turn has made recruitment much trickier than previous years. Recruitment pressures have been exacerbated by the Building Safety Act 2022, which mandated licensing for industry professionals, increasing costs and draining skills away from the industry. The business plan sets out 3 potential financial and associated operational models for the sustainable future of the partnership, intended to address the nature of the challenges posed by these circumstances. And it's for this reason that this report has an additional recommendation compared to other years, which is to endorse a review of the budget and expenditure during the course of the next financial year to evaluate the appropriateness of the chosen financial model. And that concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Chair. I have supported this since she forced us down that road those years ago. I still think for my council and my residents that this is value for money. and that there does need to be that option for us, as opposed to the one man and his dog who does the whole of the southeast poorly, very poorly. There may come a time when the cost-benefit analysis just does not work. I don't think we've got there yet. I still think that this is in ours and our residents' best interests to hang in there. And frankly, they do a good job. On the odd occasion that as a councillor I've had to contact them about something dangerous, they have responded. And that's what you need. And I know that when we had the house drop off the cliff, that wasn't funny, they were there. So if we'd have managed to get hold of one man and his dog, God knows, we'd have probably had to give them the entire budget for the year for Swale Borough Council to come out in the middle of the night and sort something out. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's value for money, and I will be supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating, so those in favour of the recommendations? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. So that then brings us on to our urgent item, and we'll need to go into private session, please.
Members have to vote.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah. No, not for that bit. We won't. No. No, we didn't go in. No. No. Yes. So, members, could I propose that we go into private session? Councillor Harrison seconded. Those in favour of that? Okay, thank you. Right, members, we'll come back out of that private session now, and I'll close the meeting, say good night to you all, wish you all a safe journey home. Could I just remind you all, the blue papers, please, to be returned so we can hand them over to Billy. Number 6, mate. Thank you.